Veuillez maintenant accueillir la députée de Toronto Centre, l'honorable Marci Ien, en conversation avec l'auteur et journaliste Liz Plank. Please welcome to the stage the Member of Parliament for Toronto Centre, the Honourable Marci Ien, in conversation with author and journalist Liz Plank.
Is this your staff?
This is
or
my
your fans, or it's both? They're
This is
staff
our team.
and team. Wow.
Aren't they the best?
They're the best. I feel like
So
we're like at a
grateful.
Celine Dion concert. Like they're front row, they're excited, and this is a testament to the work that you do. That you're. I mean, I honestly was thinking about this backstage. It's like, wow, her staff, like they really love her. Like they truly. Someone's doing a heart sign. I mean, that's such a good. I mean, obviously, it's amazing when your constituents love you, which they also do, but that your team and the people who work for you and with you feel this strongly about what you're doing and who you are, I think is incredible.
Liz, you're not supposed to make me cry in 2 seconds. That's not how this is supposed to work.
We're going to cry. We've already decided.
We've decided that this is what it's going to be.
This is the crying session.
So people are here for you too, Ms. Plank.
Okay.
They're here for you too.
Thanks.
And love you. And love your voice, your feminist voice, I might add. We were having a little chat, and when Liz came out in this dress, I said, you look like a butterfly. This looks like spring. And then we started talking about transition and transitions, butterflies. Yeah. And you've had a couple of big ones. You've got a major one coming up. Your podcasts, books, huge voice on everything that matters to women, to men, to humanity, has been heard around the globe. But you've got some changes coming, so please share.
I'm moving. So 10 years ago, I grew up in Montreal, Rosemont, petite patrie. Allô? Ouais, represent. Okay, j'adore. So I grew up in Montreal, went to, Cégep, and I actually grew up mostly speaking French, Cégep in French, and then I went to McGill in English, which was a big transition. And I then moved to the United States, to New York 10 years ago, almost like to this day. And now I'm moving to Los Angeles for a job, to do a show that's kind of like a phone a friend show where people can call in and do what we're doing right now, which is just like chat with someone who is deeply empathetic and caring and amazing. I'm moving to Los Angeles, and I'm going on another adventure. I'm a little bit scared, but we'll see where it goes.
Being scared is a good thing.
Yeah.
When it comes to change, but I'm going to back you up a little bit. Okay. Because that move to New York was you were following a boyfriend.
I followed a man, which is the least feminist thing
Let's
I've
just
ever
break
done.
it down for a second here. You were, but when you got there,
Yes.
What happened? Because you didn't even think it was going to work out.
No. You
were like, I'm just following this person and I don't know.
Look, I didn't have a visa to work there. It was really just this thing where I was like, if I get a job in a bar, I'll be very happy. And that, wasn't going to happen without a visa. So I started doing feminist reporting basically for this small media company at the time, and I wrote 5 articles a day. I had carpal tunnel syndrome in both my wrists. It was cool. I don't recommend. And then, ended up kind of being at the right time at the right place, and I had done a master's in gender and social policy and cared very much about these issues, and was pretty unapologetic about my positions.
And that's putting it lightly.
Yeah. I just didn't. I mean, to be, you're an outsider in so many respects, and that's how you identify. And I think it's actually like so cool and something that more people should know how to do. Because being an outsider is really difficult. And I was certainly an outsider. I didn't go to J school. I didn't know really how to be a journalist. But I knew what I cared about, and I found that the internet was this really cool, fertile ground to actually make social change happen. And so that's what ended up being my, distinction, but also what ended up being my success. But you've been an outsider your whole life.
I characterize myself that way. Yeah.
How do you, for people who might be either feel like they're an outsider and it's really challenging for them, or people who want to be more of an outsider, what would be your, were you just born that way, or is it something that you have to kind of practice and come back to?
I think it's just kind of me. It comes from upbringing too. I think there are people out there who are thinking, "What do you mean you're an outsider?" Okay. But I characterize myself that way, and I think it to be true because as a former journalist, I kind of rolled differently, and I look different. Here I was, a black woman from a lot of the people that I worked with, and I brought a different voice. I'm from the riding that I represent. I was born in St. Jamestown. My parents emigrated from Trinidad to Toronto. We didn't have a ton. My parents worked really hard. The people that I was mostly in newsrooms with in my previous job, had different paths. And dare I say, some of them easier. So I just had to work really hard and speak to what I cared about and make sure that there was representation in the newscasts that were being presented each night. And I made a lot of noise. I was squeaky a little bit. I haven't stopped, but I was squeaky a little bit. So when I say an outsider, that view, it wasn't about cliques. It wasn't about being with, the people that I guess you were supposed to be with. It was about doing the job and really being there for people and being a part of the people and listening and understanding. And that's why I love what I do now. So it's grassroots stuff, right? But speaking to your voice. So last night, listening to Secretary Clinton and Chrystia, there was a part of that conversation that was so real. And Secretary Clinton said, and went right to it, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, please make no mistake, that was a plan. That was a long-time strategy. And was speaking to the fact that we can't be complacent when it comes to reproductive rights, when it comes to women's rights, human rights, ever. And I'll tell you, here we are, a couple of weeks from the 3rd anniversary of George Floyd being killed, which is a big reason I ran in the first place. And we've had this conversation. And I'm connecting these two things because in our country, there were conversations where a lot of people were saying, well, look what happens over there. Look what's happening to the south of us. And, there were some, and many, the Prime Minister included, who were talking about anti-black racism and saying, no, we have to understand that this is happening here. Yeah. The same thing is true when it comes to reproductive rights. It's not, oh, look at what's happening over there. Look what's happened. Look what, governors are signing into place. Look at the rights that are being stomped on right now. This is a clear and present danger here. And that's exactly what Secretary Clinton was highlighting last night. So just a couple words on that.
Yeah. What's funny, and I left out the part where before I moved to New York, I lived in Washington, D.C. for a couple months. I did an unpaid internship when I was trying to figure out my life. And it was 2010. And that's 13 years ago. And 13 years ago, that's what I saw. They were, right-wing anti-abortion politicians were literally shutting down the government over Planned Parenthood funding. And it was one of the major reasons why I actually decided to move to the United States. Because again, not that Canada's perfect, but I was like, they need help. Things are really bad. And obviously they got worse. And there's so many lessons there. I think that there's so many things we could do a full hour on this really. They made anti-abortion politics fun, which sounds kind of wild, but it kind of applies. Like what's happening with abortion rights is what's happening with anti-immigrant sentiments, with racist policies, with anti-trans policies. It's all connected. And they, I think that there's, some of them are really, really, really good at connecting these really negative feelings that people may be feeling right now as a result of the pandemic, as a result of uncertainty, as a result of the fact that, there's so much income inequality, or people have, mental health issues, and there's a loneliness crisis. They're tapping into those real emotions that people are feeling, and they're saying, here's why. I'm going to create a story for you where the problem is, abortion. The problem is trans children, or the one athlete that, in North Dakota it's just ridiculous, right? But they're really good at storytelling, and sometimes I feel like there's a real lesson for us on the left where we go, this is really important, and you should care about this. And the right go, you really care about this. Let me tell you why you should be on my side, because I care about it too. And I think that that's like a really big distinction that I wish we would have done on abortion rights, and I wish that we did on more issues. I covered the Trump presidency as a reporter for Vox, and the one thing, there are a lot of takeaways and a lot of things that I saw there, but one of the most significant parts of covering that administration was like, these rallies are fun. Like people are, I'm not having fun, but like people are having fun. And this is a party.
As an observer, you saw this.
Yes.
Yeah.
With
Note
my own
taken.
eyes. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And so, but the upside, and I think it's really important to talk about solutions and to talk about what's going really well, because again, apathy or hopelessness just gives that's all they want. Like that's actually like way more valuable to them
Things
than
are
anything.
broken.
Yes, things are broken. Yeah. What's the point? Things are worse than they were. And obviously when Roe got overturned, it was a really hard day. I sobbed on the bathroom floor and cried for 90 minutes, and then I got back up. And then a lot of the energy, right, has been felt when it comes to, abortion rights have not just allowed Democrats to win elections, they've made them actually do better in elections than they would have done. And so people now are realizing that they're actually pro-abortion rights.
So hold on.
Weren't even.
Are you saying, not that it would ever be a good thing, but you saying there are lessons here that because it was overturned, people have woken up?
Yes. To what they're, again, because the storytelling on the right is amazing, right? We're going to save babies. Okay, sure, I'm on board, right? That sounds great. Abortion is murder. But when you go and you ask them, what does that mean? When a lawmaker says that something is murder, right? That means that there's where do murderers go?
They go to jail.
They go to jail. So are we putting women in jail? And they would never go into that part of the story. It was kind of like a mystical, I feel like we often get attacked on the left. They're like, oh, you guys are just like hippy dippies, and you're not actually talking about real numbers or real sort of concrete things here. But on abortion rights, that was their amazing weapon in this, is that they never went into detail about what these policies really meant. And so once Roe was overturned, and it's 13-year-old girls, being forced to carry up the pregnancy of a rapist, right? These horrifying stories. People realize, oh, I'm actually pro-abortion. I actually care about abortion rights, and abortion rights became more important than inflation right before the midterms, which again, just is pretty astounding. And so I think that it's really important to point to the fact, it's important to point to what's going really well, and how we're able to also rebel, even when there's laws, even when there's things that are in place that feel impossible. There's so many different ways that I feel like the movement has never been this energetic, and that there's never been this, even the fact that I use the word abortion. Right? I feel like a year ago, you were supposed to say, pro-choice, or you're supposed to say, sort of euphemisms. And we've all learned so much more about the importance and the centrality, of abortion rights because Roe was overturned. And it's a shame that it had to get to there. But we hit rock bottom, and we're only going to go up, from here.
Yeah. So, when it comes to choice, and that word choice, because I really believe that we've got to look at, here in Canada, the country as a whole, and not everybody is on board. Yeah. Let's face it, right? And so I look at that and think, okay, how do we address that? Yeah. And when you define the word choice, it means you get a choice, and I get a choice. the idea is it's just about respecting that we each have a choice. It isn't about stamping someone else out, right? Like that's what it's about. So how do we lead that way? Because there are those of us that are already on side, right? How do we lead in a way that might get the attention of others who aren't?
I mean, I really want to know what I want to know what you're doing, because I think that you're extremely effective and impactful in this space. And we were, talking backstage. I think in my conversations with people, it's really about listening, which again, you do extremely well. And I think politics and just being a politician, often it's seen as, what are you going to say? What do you have to say? But it's actually so much more about really listening and being able to really take in what people are saying. And in debates about abortion, I don't want to start from a position of like, everyone who's anti-abortion hates women. I don't actually think that's true. And I also have never seen a productive conversation in my, experience kind of go well when you're starting from that position. And so there's actually AOC talks about this, where it's like a strategy when she's talking to people who disagree, which happens all the time. I think it's called the Golden Gate Rule. And it's basically like you create an out for the person to actually agree with you or sort of expand out of their position, but still feel good about themselves. So, right, like if I start, you're anti-woman if you believe this, like there's no, I've already deemed you, right, as,
I'm in a box.
Exactly. And I've already also assigned, and like the worst thing to do if you're in a relationship, right, is like they say, is to assume the person's intentions when you're having an argument or a conflict about anything. And even I heard this really good quote the other day. It was like, bad communication is assuming that you already know. And I just thought that was so well put,
That
right?
is, yeah.
Wow, right?
Yeah.
And so I already know why you believe that. No. It's actually like, it means you're going to have a conversation and you have to listen. But I want you to share how you've approached these conversations, because you're in all kinds of different environments, mosques and faith-based communities who have a lot of reasons for feeling the way that they do. How do you approach those tricky conversations?
With respect. I like to think that my writing is a microcosm of this country, and with respect. So whether I'm in a mosque or outside of one or outside of a church or in a community, and we have these discussions, it is about listening first. But then it is about stating, this is about choice, right? And so if I choose this way and I understand your choice and respect your choice, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? When we have conversations like that, it gets people thinking. It's empowering. And you're right, people just want to be heard half the time. And it lowers the temperature. And that doesn't mean we don't have a fight on our hands. And I'm using that colloquially. We don't have a fight on our hands, but there's a respect issue, right? And when people feel respected and listened to, amazing things can happen. Amazing things. I've seen it.
How do we create more spaces where people don't agree with each other? Because I do truly think that...
Because that's how we work things out.
Yes.
Who wants to agree all the time?
No one. And also, or maybe, sorry.
Or do we?
but and even conflict is at the root of relationship, right? If you're not actually...
Okay, preach now.
Right? How are we're not actually connecting with each other if we're never in, overcoming conflict or getting through conflict. That's how I learned the most about my friends and family and, romantic partners is when
It takes honesty, though.
It does.
And it takes courage to go there.
It does, yes.
And vulnerability.
Yes.
Dare I say vulnerability.
Yes, yeah. And being kind of open again to the idea that, and again, it's something I have to remind myself of, which is it'll take a few conversations, right? It's not, we're going to have this one conversation and also not coming into it being like, I'm going to convince them that I'm right, which again, that's never the energy. Like when someone comes in with that energy in a conversation, it's never very, interesting to want to, continue the conversation. But to remember that it's incremental and it's happening which we don't love in this sort of fast-paced society where everything is supposed to be instantaneous and happen.
I want to dig a little deeper into what you mentioned off the top, and not just the transition that you're about to encounter, but some of the work that you've done, because you've chosen to put your life out there, and you've done it via podcast and broadcast and books. It takes courage to do that, yes. It's hard to do that, but there's a reason behind it, right? Like, you basically told people, I'm 35, and now you're 36. I'm 35. I don't have kids. What now? Didn't expect to be here at this age. That's a lot of personal information, Liz. That's a lot to put out there. But I look at you and listen to you and think there are a lot of people that can identify with you. And because you're willing to be vulnerable, they just might understand their situations a little bit better. You're empowering so many people. How do you do it, and why do you do it?
Thank you. That's so beautiful. I decided to freeze my eggs and document the whole process, right? So yes, freeze your eggs, especially if your employer pays for it, because it's super expensive and it should be free. But yes, so I decided to do that at the age of 35 because I was nuts. Like, I was acting a little nutty because I was like, where's my husband? Where's the father? And that's not the energy you want to bring on a first date. Just letting you know, it doesn't bode well for it's not fun for anybody on the date, including yourself. So I decided to freeze my eggs, but I realized that the reason why I hadn't done it was because I'd internalized all of these, sort of stereotypes about it, right? That I'd lost, I'd failed. I was, the character in the romantic comedy of the cold-hearted, like corporate, career-driven woman that, focused on her career too much, right? And I realized that if I had seen someone, and not to say that there are tons of women who have documented their journeys, but I had not identified with someone who had done it and really sort of followed that closely. But I realized, like, oh, I need to do that in case it helps even one person. And I need to, when I feel shame about something, I realize that, like, probably other people are feeling shame about it too. And also the best antidote to shame is, is not having secrets and sort of being vulnerable and out in the open. So it was definitely an overshare, but I feel good about it, and I feel proud that we did it. And I know that, one of the big issues that I now care about so much is that men also have a biological clock. A lot of men don't know that. A lot of women don't know that. But actually, in half of cases of fertility issues with straight couples, it's, half of them are the woman, is it's part of it, it's the woman's, not fault, but it's her, and in half of them it's the man. So after the age of 35, men's sperm quality also decreases, and it increases miscarriages and complications. And again, it's we should be, men should know about their fertility just as much as women, and should be taught about this just as much as women. So yeah, it became very, you just learn so much through the experience. But what would be, because you talk to young women, I mean, again, and my unique position of privilege, which is I was able to afford it, I was able to do that. It is so inaccessible, and particularly in the United States, healthcare is completely inaccessible for most Americans. So, yeah, when you talk to young women, is there a common thing that young women want to talk to you about, or is it so different? What are you hearing as the main concern?
So there's so much here. Okay, so first of all, there are a couple of common themes. We've got this action plan to end gender-based violence, and it's a big piece of the work that we're doing. Huge piece of the work we're doing. So we're in meetings with our provincial and territorial counterparts. And basically, provinces will be able to work with grassroots organizations. They know what they need the most. What none of it needs is not what Ontario needs, is not what Manitoba needs, is not what BC needs. But during the pandemic, a huge spotlight was put on women, gender diverse people and young people, and that happens to be the ministry, because they were disproportionately impacted. Gender-based violence skyrocketed. Yeah. Violence against 2S LGBTQI plus people, youth, all of it. So that's a huge part of the work. And that's what I was talking to young people about. Young women are concerned about a lot of things, but it depends, Liz, on who you're talking to, okay? So if I'm talking to an Indigenous young woman, she's talking about survival. She's talking about, am I gonna make it to 25? And how can you help me do that? If I'm talking to a racialized woman, a black woman, I worked through the entire pandemic. I was on the front lines. I am burnt out. That's actually right across the board. My mental health is in a shambles. How are you helping? What are you doing? And so I'm able to talk about the good work that my colleagues like Carolyn Bennett are doing with regards to mental health and young people in community, young women in community, and addressing things in a culturally appropriate way. Right across the board, it's mental health. Yeah. Right across the board. During the pandemic, young people in particular, were asking themselves some questions. Who am I? Where am I? What's my place? Women as well. So many questions. And we've got some answers, but not all of them. What's helped greatly is disaggregated data, because everything I just described is women, but then breaking out who those women are in our great country. And that's really important, because women aren't a monolith. We're not a monolith. And we each have different things, and different things happening in our lives, and different things that we face. I want to talk about something you mentioned, and that's men and boys. Because you wrote a book, and you profess to love men as a feminist. But it's an important thing, because we do a lot of work where we engage men and boys. There's several organizations in this whole idea of what it means to be part of a system, what the patriarchy means, what feminism means, their part in all of that, what consent means. And this starts at school age. There are some that don't think men and boys need to be a part of this conversation. I'm not one of those people. Neither are you. Can you speak a little bit about how important it is that we engage men and boys in all that we've discussed thus far?
Yeah. So good. Such a good question. Everyone has a gender, right? That's just the way it is. And I did women's studies and, did a graduate program in gender studies and policy. And I think we had like one class on men. Like it would be like the 1 week, right? In the way that like the women week for other, topics was. But when I started working on my book, I'm also realizing we're out of.
We'll take a couple more minutes. I don't know if it's so late.
I looked and I was like, there'll be like 15 minutes left, and it's at
zero.
Is this what happens when you're with her? It's like a vortex. You're just lost in her eyes and ideas and the hope about the future. But no, I feel so energized. Okay, so when I started working on a book about masculinity, at first it was like I was coming in a little snarky. I was like, okay, there's never any men at these conferences, and Donald Trump was starting to run for office and was saying horrible things, and it was just I had a lot of anger. And so I started working on this book, and then I, wanted to interview men and ask them questions. But what really, really struck me is that in many cases, I was lady on the street, in the park, coming up to you, like stranger, the first person to really ask men what's hard about being a man. Or even like, what does it mean to be a man? Right? Like, I would love right now, like, if every man, if you want to come up to me afterwards, like, what does it mean to you? It's all different in the way that it's different for women, and in the way that it's different for a white man than it is from a black man, especially in America, but in Canada as well. Class, yes, everywhere. Yeah. It is just, black boys in America who are raised by millionaires are just as likely to be incarcerated as white boys who are raised under the poverty line, right? There's something just fundamentally broken and different about the experience of being a man, and it's just as multifaceted and I think interesting to really delve into masculinity as it is to delve into what it means to be a woman. And I really realized that there was a lot of pain and pain that I think men weren't even really aware of and felt shame that they even sort of felt. And so it became also very clear to me that masculinity wasn't the problem, it was the solution, and that we were ignoring that part of the puzzle, and also coming back to assigning intentions, saying men are acting like this, because they hate women, or again, whatever. And I realize, again, there's so much going on here that we're not talking about. So I think it's one of the coolest conversations that I've been, grateful to be a part of. Obviously, Bell Hooks wrote The Will to Change 20 years ago, was talking about it before, so many other people were, and I highly recommend her book. It's such a delicious, beautiful read. And and I just, it's really about inclusion, right? And sort of having empathy.
And if we say inclusion, we have to mean
yes,
it.
everyone. Yeah. And it's not about taking mics away from men and being like, you're not allowed to speak. Like, that's not a fun party, right? Like the rallies that are fun are the ones where like, we care about what you care about and we want to hear from you. And, saying you're not allowed and only these people can talk and you've talked enough. Like, I don't think that's not the party I want to be a part of, And so it's about throwing more fun parties, including everybody. And I think we'll have better results in terms of the conversations that we're able to have from it. I really encourage you, just ask like your brother or your boyfriend or your nephew or, right, when did you know that you were a man? Like, that's such a fun question because, it'll just open up a lot of different things that often, I learned things from my dad that he never shared with me. And my dad is very nurturing and caring, and we have a great relationship. But there's a lot that men aren't sharing, and not enough spaces where they're able to do it in a positive way. And that's why we're seeing the rise of Andrew Tate's and all the other, clown shows. But that's, they're like, it's the wrong medicine for a real illness, right? Like the problem is there. They've just found a great fun story, right? And a way to be like, come over here. We know you're hurting.
We hear you.
Yes. And we have to say that too. We really do. So we ran out of time.
Can I just say, I love you so much.
I love you. I love her. Yeah.
That's all. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Merci.
Thank you. Merci, merci.
Oh my God. I love your...